don't worry. No one has this all figured out. You don't have to have all the answers and you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing to build some self awareness. You have to be willing to start with yourself. You have to be willing to go first.
Hey, it's Nikki, Llewellyn Gregory, and you're on Gut Plus Science. You're in for a fast-paced, storytelling, action item-rich leadership growth experience. I hope you make this podcast a habit. I consider it a leadership mentoring tool. Learning together makes us better together, and that is how we change the world around us. Let's get to it.
Hey, it's Nikki, and welcome back to Gut Plus Science. Today, we're going straight at a challenge that I see so many HR pros face, and driving real culture change that sticks. That's the thing. My guest is Heather Haas, CEO of Advisa. She's a business owner, leadership advisor, culture strategist, and expert helping organizations turn good intentions into real business outcomes. If you've ever felt stuck in program fatigue or struggling to get the buy-in from the leadership team for the culture work, this episode, This Time with Heather, is going to be a gift. We're diving into why so many programs fail, the system you need to succeed, and exactly how HR can lead lasting change and transformation. So let's make this stuff stick, shall we? I'm so excited. Heather, I know we talked before and we both agree that HR professionals, they're craving the stuff that sticks. We're going to be leaning into a lot of what you've learned today to share that. But can you start with why doesn't it? Why do most culture efforts flop?
Well, I think the first thing is HR can't do it alone. In a lot of organizations we work with, we're supporting HR professionals who feel like they've got the whole weight of creating culture change, creating high engagement work environments, that it all falls to them. And sometimes the most frequently asked question we get is, how do I get the executive team on board? So, one of the first things I would say is that any initiative that HR takes on to try to make positive improvement, if the executive team is not bought in at the top, it's going to compromise the efforts that HR is putting forth to really transform the culture. I think sometimes the other thing is we're focused on buzzwords and not behaviors. In our work, we've been doing this for almost 40 years. What we find is that, the culture of an organization is really what most people say and do most of the time. And so to change your culture, you have to get really clear and intentional about what are the mindsets and behaviors that line up with the business goals and strategies that we have. And so sometimes I think people aren't thinking at that deep of a level about what does it really take. And then lastly, I would just say that it's not a fast process. That's not to say you can't influence. That's not to say that you can't drive change. But, culture change is not simple. It is actually complex. It can be done and it can be done well, but it isn't something that happens quickly. And we're also conditioned, we want things to happen so fast. And this is one of those things that takes time.
Yeah. And we're going to dig right into a couple of things that you shared right there, because I have so many questions around it. I love the first thing you shared that's so important is HR can't do it alone. And how many times is it treated like a silo? HR will handle that, or whatever, or HR's in charge. We're going to delegate or outsource the culture initiatives over to HR. But then we talk about the culture of an organization and how important it is, but we're trying to silo it. So I'm so glad that you shared that. Can we dive in a little bit deeper to this mindset around the bigness of it? Because, we were talking in the intro there about program flops, or, they just are be ramped up in such a big thing. And then a couple weeks later or months later, it's forgotten about. Can you go a little bit deeper on the reality of how big it is to shift culture, and just give us a little bit of context to better understand?
Absolutely. I think, programs are great. A lot of companies have been investing in, we send our people to events, or, we signed up for a group that certain leaders go to, or we've even, paid to send people to certain leadership development experiences. The problem is that those are all sort of ad hoc. They're not all aligned and aimed at the type of work environment that will enable the organization's strategic aims. So while individuals are out there learning great things, I think any learning is good learning, but not all learning creates organizational change. And that's really what I think we try to bring to this is if you want to get serious about changing the culture of the organization and aligning it with what it's going to take to get where you're trying to go, we've got to declare and name what are the mindsets and behaviors that are important. And what do we need leaders to say and do then to coach those mindsets and behaviors, hold people accountable, et cetera?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. And let's go to what you had shared, in some of those initial talking points was, getting the leadership buy-in and how often HR who feels like they're in a silo, they know that's the challenge. They're like, I can't get my leaders on the same page. How do you approach that? It's a very popular thing. You're like, yes. How do you approach that? How do you hit it head on?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we talk about is all organizations have certain results that they're trying to achieve. There are financial metrics, there are strategic targets. Most organizations have a strategic plan to get those results that we're going to, these are the X's and O's of how we're going to go about achieving those results. What lies in between is culture. It's the people who are either saying and doing the things that will hasten and accelerate the achievement of those goals, or we've got people and leaders in the middle who are saying and doing the things that will get in the way. I share that because that's an opening for HR professionals to have a more strategic, to elevate this conversation with the executive team, to sit down with them and say, I heard what you said when you rolled out the game plan for the year. These are the metrics we're going after. And I'm also very aware of the strategies that you have in place for us as a business. My role as the HR leader is to make sure that the important stuff in the middle, our people and our culture, that we get that aligned so that we can get where you'd like us to go faster and more profitably. So that's what I'd like to talk about. That is a level of conversation that isn't coming to the executive team saying, I'd like to get some budget to send some people to some training. I always talk about if you can elevate the conversation first and talk at a more strategic and have it be a business conversation, not a people conversation, not an HR conversation. It's got to be a business conversation first. Or for nonprofits, it's got to be an organizational conversation first. Then you can help leaders understand the important role that culture plays and the important role that you play as the strategic leader to really prioritize the right things, oversee the changes that need to be made so that, like I said, what people are saying and doing, most importantly, what leaders are saying and doing, those are the right things to create an environment that's vibrant, where people can thrive and where the business results can be achieved.
I'm going to break this down in like a real time example here for a second, and let's see how this applies. So you get referred from someone that loves your work, a leader in HR that they know is struggling and is really looking to make change in an organization. So you get this introduction, you or someone on your team, and that person is like, here's my vision for what I want to do. I'm stuck because I can't get that buy-in from the executive team. You really come alongside and lock arms with them to prep them on how to then become that transformational change agent to go to the leadership team to then say, what I heard you say is, let's tap into the strategy that we know is laid out. Let's talk ROI. Let's position you to be that champion. Talk about that and what that looks like and how prevalent that is. Am I on the right track that you're locking arms to help them be able to champion that and turn it around to be able to then bring you guys in, right? And everybody is talking to be able to work together. Am I resonating?
Yes, totally. And it can look a lot of different ways. In some organizations, you have the type of executive team where that HR leader is already, I hate to use it's such an overused phrase, but they already have a seat at the table. That they're already respected and they're already a go-to person for really helping the organization grow and advance. In those situations, sometimes all that HR leader needs is a little bit of our tools, a little bit of our perspective, and some guidance and consulting from us. That's more the exception than the rule. Often we're coming alongside an HR professional who says, I don't know how to get their attention. I've been trying. Can you help? In that case, we believe strongly that data is a catalyst for change. And so we've created a proprietary assessment. It's called a leadership and culture assessment. And we start small. It's really about if we can engage the executive team to let us do this leadership and culture assessment, which is essentially kind of an x-ray. You think about an x-ray, if you've got a broken bone or something hurts. I mean, people come to us because something kind of hurts at work. Something doesn't feel right. We're not as effective as we could be. We're losing good people, or perhaps there's been, a huge change that has occurred and we've got to recast or reboot our culture. When we can come forward and say, you know what, let's just start with some data. Let's do a little x-ray of the human architecture. And then what we do is we sit down with the executive team and we just talk about what came through in that exercise. And that's usually very powerful because we're not asking for anything in that. I mean, there is a fee, a small fee to get that front end work going and collect that data. But the debrief of that is so rich and so powerful because that assessment shines a light on how effective are leaders at multiple levels in the organization at 16 behaviors that are highly correlated with leader effectiveness. There are questions about how effective is the organization at attracting and retaining top talent. And then there are some open-ended employee loyalty questions. And when that report gets shared back and our team has the opportunity to sit with executives along with the HR professional, there are usually some very eye-opening opportunities for improvement. And then all eyes sort of go to the HR person in the room, and you have a CEO saying, we got to make some change. How do we do this? And so that's what I mean about data as a catalyst for change. It helps people see their situation through new eyes. And now we can talk about, are you equipped to go it alone? Do you have the tools, experience, et cetera, to make some change? And or how can we help as an outside provider with a proven process?
I love that we started there. I'm really excited to dig into the advisor culture system framework and go deep there and really understanding your ways. But I think it's so important for the HR leader that's listening or someone that knows an HR leader that's struggling in the silo to know that they could have a strategic partner that can lock arms with them to help them. You said earlier, overused, like get the seat at the table, the presence that they're looking for to have a stronger voice, and that they don't have to do that alone. And many times it's like, I don't even know where to start. I'm sure with the HR, they're like, or I feel exhausted. To have that strategic partnership where you bring data, you lean into strategy, and you talk the language of the leadership team to prep them so that now, we can all get aligned to move forward. So now let's talk about the Advisa culture system framework, the way you all, support and lead the change alongside the HR leaders.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we've been doing this for a long time, and we started out as a predictive index certified partner, right? And this is relevant to how we got to this framework. And predictive index is an amazing software platform and training platform. It helps leaders match people to jobs and helps managers communicate effectively and coach. But again, we had a lot of success. A lot of clients implemented it really well, and it was moving the needle, but it wasn't quite enough. And so then we said, you know what? It's really about leadership development. They need predictive index. They need data about their people, and leaders need skills for how do I give feedback? How do I coach? How do I, leaders tragically are so underdeveloped, especially coming out of COVID. I mean, the whole world has changed on its axis, and we've got a crop of leaders who have not had the opportunity to retool. And so we spent a whole chunk of time building out incredible leadership development programs. And those were going well. They are going well. But again, something was still missing. It was like you can send your leaders to the best leadership development program on the planet. And yet the needle still isn't moving on transforming the culture to be more aligned with business goals. So all of this history and work really led us to say, well, what have we learned through all that? When organizational results are not forthcoming, what are the points of failure? And so there's really 5 things. And that's what we put out as our point of view on this. We call it A.T.L.A.S. I'm a former teacher, so an acronym is a helpful way to remember things. But the first A stands for activation from above. We touched on it a little earlier, but when the executive team does not intellectually understand and buy into the value of a healthy work culture, it does not matter what people downstream are trying to do to make improvements or make change. So activation from above means you have got to have the attention, the buy-in, and the support of the people at the top so that they can say the things, do the things, and make the investments of both time and money if they're serious about making change and transforming the work environment over time. So the T in A.T.L.A.S is trust and shared purpose. So even if you have an executive team who says, I get it, I'm in Vistage, I do EOS, we know the importance of this stuff, but they haven't made explicit and clear the mission, vision, and values of the organization. If that is fuzzy or missing, then there isn't anything for culture to hook into. Your culture needs to enable the mission, vision, and activate those values. So if those things are not present, or if there's any confusion or misalignment about who we are, where are we headed, and what are the core values that represent our corporate character, culture change is going to be tough. Those things have got to be in place. The L in A.T.L.A.S is leader effectiveness. So once we have declared these are the values that represent the pillars of the intentional culture we're trying to create, the next important piece of that is, what do leaders need to say and do to activate those values? And what skills do they need to do that? And so leader effectiveness is really the axis on which all of this turns, because culture change happens through the mindsets and behaviors of leaders. It happens through what leaders celebrate and tolerate day in and day out. They've got to walk the talk that was just, and the important things that were just declared at the highest level. So leader effectiveness is huge. And typically that is why we're so passionate about leadership development that is born out of and customized very explicitly to include those important things. That way leaders have the space they deserve to learn, how do you want me to do this? What does success look like? Teach me. Then the second A in A.T.L.A.S is actionable people data. One of the biggest myths around talent management and culture is that you can't measure this stuff. Yes, you can. So you've got to understand who your people are, how they're motivated, how they're wired. You've got to understand employee sentiment, whether that's through employee engagement data or exit interviews or stay interviews, or something like the leadership and culture assessment that we do that I mentioned earlier. You've got to have your hands on, especially leaders need to have access to actionable information about the employee experience. Without it, they're flying blind. You would never have a CFO who operates without financials. You would never have a quality manager who isn't operating with real-time specific information about the quality of their product. So that's the second A. And then the S is systems. And, we often talk about that Deming quote that a bad system beats a good person every time. So you can do everything right. Executive team is bought in. Our mission, vision, values is crystal clear. Leaders are in programs where they have the time and space to improve. They know how to activate the core values. And we've even got tons of actionable people data. But if we don't have the tech systems so that hybrid teams can meet and engage effectively, if our policies, procedures, and norms are somehow at odds with the intentional culture that we've just declared, now we have competing priorities. And so all 5 of those drivers, they work together you can tackle them sort of one at a time, but what makes culture really sing and what makes change really happen, it's when all five of those things are being invested in very meaningful, strategic ways.
Mm. So good. Can I dig into some questions? I was
Yeah.
typing out, okay, how do I narrow them down? Let's get started here. So, the activation from above, I'm curious about a consistent, pretty popular scenario that happens where you see something that maybe that company that you're working with, they're like, yep, we got activation from above. You see it though, it's not there and you call it. And so you're like, I see this and we can't move forward, and because of your insights and your history and experience, you see that and it's pretty popular that this happens. What's overlooked?
Well, I mean, sometimes what's overlooked is when we know the CEO is the problem and nobody has the courage to tell the CEO that she's the problem. And, the reality is sometimes we have to overlook it. That, we'll be working with an HR professional who says, you know what? I can't control what she says and does. She's giving it lip service. She's at least letting me move forward with this initiative. I can only control what touches the people. And I want to do all of this really well. And I want your help and support in doing that. And in that case, you just go in eyes wide open. It's like, yes, we will, but eyes wide open means at some point when, potentially budgets get a little tighter, if that CEO isn't really bought into how her behavior impacts the broader team. And, sometimes a CEO like that can say, you know what, forget all this culture stuff, it's not working. Or, hey, these managers need coaching. I don't have time for it. Those are the types of inconsistencies where sometimes we just have to work around it. Sometimes that we, as an outside party, where we may be doing a lot of coaching with a lot of their leaders, we may be in rooms, month after month with groups of managers. We may again have that leadership and culture data. We may be in a position to sit down one-on-one with that executive and say, this might be hard to hear, but you hired us to help you improve. And an observation that we've made is that a lot of the challenges stem from, fill in the blank, whatever hard thing that we might need to share. But I think a lot of our best clients would say that is arguably the most important role that we've played, is another voice, an objective, impartial voice in this conversation to help bump the record to the next track.
Mm. Going back to this, I just see this vision of a strategic partner, ally to HR. So many times HR is put in this box of the tactical stuff, right? That the fluffy stuff or the tactical stuff. And the way you're describing this is like, we're going to lock arms to be seen. Our presence is going to be strong and strategic. Elevating that together, I can see it so clearly. That's awesome. And I don't think that is a profound norm. That is what most would want, but you don't see that very often. And so I think you're doing a great job of illustrating the difference in that. So that's awesome. And the example that you gave around the activation from above with the CEO, when you first started going down this path with the CEO disengaged or not in the plan, the thing that came to my mind, I've heard this talk track in the past 6 weeks at least 3 times. Well, you're here to fix them. And that is so popular that, whatever role it was, and I think very popular when the person comes into the CEO role, they weren't hired into that. They were, the other CEO left and they're advanced into this. And it's, and naturally it's like, hey, you're here to help them. They're not in it. And it's a very popular situation that can really hurt things. And so anyways, thank you for sharing that. I see that a lot. When it comes to T, trust and shared purpose, I was curious if you have a client that you've worked with. You don't have to say their name, or you can if you want, but they model the way on this. Like they do this so well on the clarity and who we are and where we're going that it's just admirable. What does that look like?
Yeah, we work with a relatively large home builder, and yes, it is admirable the way that they live their mission, the way that they cast a vision for the future that is compelling and that people want to be part of. They are so authentic with their values in that they don't claim to be perfect, but they do hold themselves to a high standard, and they're not afraid to make really tough decisions, like really tough decisions, hiring and firing kinds of things related to when the values are not being lived out. And those decisions and those tough calls, the executive boardroom is not immune. It goes all the way to the top. So yeah, we have several clients that are just inspiring in terms of the way that they do that. But that home builder really is top of mind for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And just sitting with the power that comes with making tough decisions as a norm doesn't mean you're not people first and caring, but you're not putting the things on the, I'm don't have the courage to do the things or whatever. It's just it's a powerful thing. And we have seen so many times stories on the show where when we allow, what we tolerate, right? Or whatever that is, you allow the things and then it so fast penetrates throughout. And
It
so when we
does.
make those tough decisions and model that way, others get the courage to do that too. So
That's right.
yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So the next on Atlas L. So leader effectiveness, you said it's really the axis.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we really believe that the shadow of the leader in an organization is a very real thing. I mean, another metaphor, I guess, to think about it is that, leaders are the window through which employees see the organization. So if your leaders are not consistently showing up and emphasizing and coaching and celebrating the same sorts of things related to the culture that we're trying to create, that creates inconsistency. In the same way that, if you think of marketing and your brand out there in the world, if customers are experiencing your brand differently, that's a problem. And, internally, your leaders are your brand, your employer brand activators. They are the ones who are touching the sheep. So, yeah, it's really critical that they are equipped and that they are both confident and clear about and capable of saying and doing the things that will help people connect personally with the ethos of the organization, that will help people grow and develop within the organization. And most leaders we work with would tell you they need help. They want to be led. They need and want someone to come alongside them and say, "Don't worry, no one has this all figured out. You don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing to build some self-awareness. You have to be willing to start with yourself. You have to be willing to go first." The leaders learning themselves first. Who am I? How am I wired? And how do my behaviors land on other people? And then how can I self manage and be accountable for who I am and how I don't have to change who I am, but I do have to be responsible for what I say and do and how that affects other people. So leaders going first in that way, going on their own development journey, is what unlocks the opportunity for other people to be vulnerable and to maybe raise their hand and say, "I made a mistake, but I want to get better and I want to learn. And will you help me?" That's the kind of very real relationship building and engagement that we need to have happening in organizations for leaders to be effective, building teams and growing people.
I think that verbiage you used, axis, when you said leader effectiveness is the axis, it really hit me. I'm like, there's so much depth there. It's really working on ourselves from the inside out. And it's a consistent journey. Because how many times do we hear it's like the ego play is really the thing and it's really our inner work stuff, right? But that's so many times overlooked because we're doing technical leadership training versus like adaptability. change from the inside out stuff that a lot of time is overlooked, which I know you all at Advisa are very, very into. So just that access thing. Like I liked it. Okay. Now let's go into the second A, that actionable people data. So Gut Plus Science has science in it because I love the mix of like emotion and gut mixed with the science backed. Let's use, numbers to guide us forward. Just like you were saying, every CFO does. Let's do it for people because they're most important, right? But sometimes we miss that part. Tell me an example of where data revealed a crucial unveiling that helped to change something.
Mm. Wow, we work with so much data. I guess I would give an example of an executive team. We were helping them with some strategy, and they had identified that we have some aggressive growth goals. And the good news is we've done really well creating a warm and welcoming work culture. People generally really like working here, and that's a really good thing. But we're starting to experience the tension between that warm, fuzzy environment and the moments and the decisions that we have to make that are really a bit of those high performance type decisions. We might love Joe, but if Joe is no longer able to perform at the level that we need, we might have to make a change with Joe. And the organization, like really wrestling with that tension of it's at odds. And so, back to your question about data, we use what's called a competing values framework. You can Google it, but it's a way of understanding your culture in 4 different quadrants. One quadrant being very entrepreneurial, it's all about innovation and change comes fast, and it's about drive and creativity. One quadrant is what's called clan. That's that people focused. We're collaborative and we're connected and esprit de corps. You've got a quadrant that's about process and precision, and you've got a quadrant that's about results and discipline. When we can plot the predictive index behavioral results of the leadership team in those 4 quadrants, so we overlay people's behavioral drives and needs, and we overlay that to sort of the cultural behaviors that exist in those 4 quadrants, it jumps off the page. And in the company that I'm talking about, they said to us, here's our from to. We don't want to lose the warm and engaging work environment that we have, but we have got to become more disciplined about results and have a higher bar for performance. And we said, got it. And so then we plotted the leadership team's data on that 4 quadrant matrix, and they looked at it and they were like, oh my gosh, all of us are up here in clan. And we are expecting to take the organization into results and discipline. Intellectually, we know that's what we need to do. But the way we are wired and the way we all naturally show up is more of this people oriented. And so now that changes the whole conversation. We can say, how do we keep what's good about that? Because you said you don't want to lose it, but what does that mean for some changes in behavior or different systems, or even at the bare minimum, simply just naming for the organization? What got us here is this culture of family and teamwork and collaboration. But we have some big growth goals ahead of us. We don't want to lose that. We want to pull that through. But team, we're going to have to do some hard things if we're going to grow and meet our goals. And here's what we mean by that. And here's what that looks like. And here's how you're going to start to see. Just naming it alone can be so helpful. So now people understand, oh, okay, we have, new performance metrics. That's not because the executive team are these big bad people. It's because we understand the vision. We understand what's happening here, and we're part of it, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. It does. I can feel the energy there.
But the data, truly, until you juxtapose people data, whether it's people's leaders' behavioral drives and needs, or sometimes it can be data that we show from our leadership and culture assessment, where we're able to reveal, hey, senior leadership, you guys said everything is great. Frontline leaders, they said things are pretty good too. What's going on in the middle? These people have a very different perspective of how effective leaders are in the organization and how the organization as a whole is set up to attract and retain top talent. Those are the kind of things. And then you've got a CEO who's like, holy cow, if they're confused in the middle, we have a big problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the data is what gets them there.
Right. I crave that data light bulb. You see the data and you're together and people's light bulbs are going off and now people are aligned and we're rowing in the same direction. There's a lot of work that it takes to get there, to be able to do all the things like what are we measuring and whatever. And that's where you guys come in. But that outcome of, whoa, where we see it. It's
Yes.
fantastic. Okay, let's move on to the last one here, which is systems. And something was coming to mind when you were talking around simple, not easy. So culture is not at all, as we talked earlier. It's a very big thing that people are like, oh, we're going to do this for a quarter and see how it goes. And it's like, oh boy, that's why I was like, let's lay some context for it is a multi-year, ongoing, very big thing. But we can make it simplified. And I think the systems, that's what you were saying. It's like a bad system beats a good person any day. Can you just give it, before we have to head into our lightning round and wrap up here, a quick little understanding of what a system making this simple looks like played out?
One very simple example is if we say family is a core value, and we've invested a lot of time and energy into activating that and making sure people feel that, but yet we have a really outdated parental leave policy. We have to call that out. Someone needs to be brave and say, you're saying family is really important, yet this policy is it's not competitive, it's not current, and it isn't going to enable me to be a working mom, or I'm going to have to make a choice. So that's a very practical example. I think another more macro example is we invest in leadership development. It's all aligned with the important things we've declared, but yet leaders learn all these new things, but they literally don't have the technology systems. For example, a performance management platform to effectively do one-on-ones and keep track of what did we say we were going to do, and how do we give shout outs and kudos and make sure all of that can be easily organized. Again, back to the financial example. I mean, the financial systems that companies invest in and the way that they can keep track of the numbers and run reports 18 ways to Sunday, that's amazing. And it aids decision making. But then we expect leaders to have no people management systems. And certainly they may be able to use certain tactical type or administrative type systems, but more strategic systems, for example, like the predictive index software, where you can get in and you can see who are my people and how do I understand their needs and build some teams and overlay different people to different job targets and get into my engagement data and see that on a manager level. And how is that trending given the new skills I've been learning? And that's the kind of system that supports the learning and the development that we've been investing in. So it's sort of a shame to invest in everything on the front end and then people sort of get back out in the wild and it's like, well, I'd love to be able to, try out all these new skills, but I don't have the time and I don't have the tools to really make that behavior change stick over time.
Yeah, that's good. What is our people ops or people system source of truth, right? We'd never run our sales process, or you shouldn't, without your CRM, right? Like it's got all the next steps. It's like, and people are most important. So we should have a source of truth for all of us. I love that. Thank you so much. This has been so good. We're going to head over to our lightning round. Before we do you want to wrap us up with any tactical next steps of advice, maybe leading them into the tool that we talked about earlier? How do we want to wrap up? Like, here's a tip now to get started or take the next step before we head over.
Yes, I think I may have said it earlier, but a lot of times people really struggle with, they'll say, wow, I listened to what you had to say, or I read what you wrote. It all really resonates, but it's overwhelming and I don't know where to start. Sometimes the first step is the most important step. And if you are feeling that right now and you're listening, if you go to our website, advisa.com, you'll find right on the homepage a 5 minute culture check. And so you'll have the opportunity, 5 minutes or less, to get a quick burst of data that tells you sort of those five drivers that we talked about, where are you strong and where do you really have some room to improve? And even just that little abbreviated culture check can really get you started or at least point you in the direction of what you may want to do next. And that's free. So I would encourage people to check that out.
Great. And we'll link that in the show notes as well. I highly recommend go check it out. 5 minutes, why not, for all of this amazing goodness and give you a roadmap forward. So, Heather, this has been so great. Loved hanging out with you today and many learnings and love sharing this and inspiring our audience. Now we get to lean into the personal side of Heather, just some fun stuff. But we always start with our first question, which is your favorite book of all time or favorite recent read?
Oh, I would have to go with favorite book of all time because this came up in conversation with my family recently. But The Fountainhead. It's a very thick book. I actually read it in high school, believe it or not. But it's about Howard Rourke, an architect. And I think like the tagline of the book is that the human ego is the fountainhead of progress. And so the whole book explores, and it's super relevant for me right now with everything that's swirling around with AI. How does what is uniquely human carve into, bump into, or shape the technical, the more defined aspects of the world. And that book isn't for everyone, but it is a book that I remember reading and just sort of my mind was blown. And it's also very philosophical, and it just really it turned me on to reading in general, and it really stuck with me. The characters stuck with me, the themes. It's a good one.
It's putting in the category for me, Course in Miracles. I don't know if you've read that, but it's
No, I
in
haven't.
the realm. And I'm like, I love that book. I have it like table side. I'd never be able to sit down and just read it, but just so many nuggets that are life teachings and things. So I'm gonna go get it. Okay, so second lightning question here. What is the core that brought you to becoming a sixth grade teacher in your past?
Yes, that's where I started out. I started out teaching. I think, initially I went into teaching because I loved kids and I loved school. I mean, I loved learning, but I really, when you talk about the core, I've done a lot of work to understand like that is my superpower. I love helping people learn things. I love helping people understand themselves and the world in a new way. And really helping people get where they're trying to go. I get a lot of joy out of that. I got a lot of joy out of that when I was working with young people. And everything we do here at Advisa is aimed at that as well. It's just that now we work with adults instead of, when I was working with 11 and 12-year-old kids. But now I have my own kids and I get to help inspire and influence them. But teaching and learning is in my DNA for sure.
Well, you modeled that out really well in our episode today.
Oh, thank you.
Incredible teaching skills that you shared. So thank you so much. Okay, so I hear that journaling is your jam. There's many of us that get stuck with that. It's like, I've tried, I just don't know how. Give us a little bit. Help us understand your take on journaling and maybe inspire someone to go try it in a different way.
Yeah, I think journaling is at its best when it's really simple and where people don't put a lot of pressure on themselves. Like, I have to get up at 5 and do a meditation and then do a journal. For me, it really is. I try on a daily basis to reflect on what am I grateful for. Gratitude is a great antidote for reframing and giving you perspective, especially when you get really caught up in your own head and what's happening to you or not happening to you. So I try to think about what am I grateful for? What do I need to let go of? That's a really important one. And what do I need to really focus on in the next day or the next week or whatever the time frame? So that's a simple little framework for journaling. I would also say that especially as I look at my kids, one of my daughters is kind of into journaling too, but she does a lot of it on her phone. So it doesn't have to be you're writing, something in a journal. It can be you pull out your phone and you just sort of voice text or, talk into it. But what you can do is you can use that as a way to process how you're feeling or highlight and capture, what you felt during the day. That's really the other thing we've learned in our work. A lot of people struggle to even name an emotion. When I coach leaders and I was like, well, tell me how you're feeling. Well, I'm frustrated. Well, that's sort of a catch-all word. Like, what are you really feeling? Are you angry? And we just have a very limited emotional vocabulary. And I think journaling can be a moment where we spend time with ourselves and it's not, it's not self-care. I mean, it is self-care, but really it's just self-understanding, self-exploration, because you'd be surprised when you give yourself even just 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to think and then capture some of what is bubbling up. It can be very healing and very, very powerful.
Yeah. Thank you for the core reminder. Remove the shoulds.
Yeah.
It's just in a lot of things. If you're stuck, like I get stuck in journaling. I'm like, I have so many shoulds about what time of day or how do I do this or do I have the right pin? Stop, it's funny. Well, thank you so much, Heather, for being here today. What is the best way for people to follow up if they have a direct connection, they want to reach out to you? What would you recommend?
Yep. I'm on LinkedIn. Heather Haas, you can find me there. And I write and share my thoughts on occasion. And then, of course, our website, advisa.com, you'll find a wealth of information and a lot of framing around who we are and what we do and why we believe it's really important.
Heather, thank you for joining Gut Plus Science and helping me to collaborate with you and back up this statement that HR professionals crave a system for culture change. Yes, they do. And we broke down some truth you can act on to really support that happening. Number one, HR can't do it alone. HR is not in a silo. HR is at the table, integrated to make impact. They are the heart of making people movement and business movement. Number two, we must get leadership team and executive buy-in to move HR initiatives forward at the fullest. And then number three, we broke down the Advisa framework that spells A.T.L.A.S. And here it is. We're going to put this in the show notes too, so you can go take a look or head on over to the Advisa website to learn more. But I love this. A, activation from above. The T is trust and shared purpose. The L is leader effectiveness. The A is actionable people data. And then the S is systems. So when we've got activation from above to move things forward and clarity of who we are and where we're going, and we trust that with leaders that have done inner work and are, they have the tools to help activate and move us forward. And then we have the actionable people data. I love the data side of, being rooted in those data points to lead the change forward. And then the systems that I think Heather's statement was a bad system beats a good person anytime or every time or whatever. A system is here to help all of us move forward better, easier, faster, right? And so, man, nothing beats a good system. Such a great episode. We'll see you all next time. And thanks again, Heather. Excited about our partnership with Advisa.
We just left the world a little bit better. Now, go do something with it.